Ever feel like you're just stuck on the outside looking in when you're playing a video game? Like you just want to reach through the screen and actually explore those worlds.
Yeah.
Well, that is exactly what XR promises. And today, we're going to dive deep right into the thick of it and learn how to build these immersive experiences with Unity.
And I gotta say, it is a really exciting time to be diving in. We are way past those like clunky headsets and stuff. XR now, it's like this whole spectrum of experiences, and each one kind of blurs the lines between, what's real and what's digital.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit for our listener because it's easy to get tripped up on all the acronyms, right?
Yeah.
We got VR, we got AR, we got MR.
Yeah.
So when we say VR, what we mean is total immersion, right? You strap on a headset and boom, you are transported to this completely different 3D world.
Exactly, yeah. But then there's AR, right? And that's more about taking the reality you're already in and enhancing it.
Right, like adding to it.
Yeah. So instead of completely transporting you, it's like imagine pointing your phone at a building and then all of a sudden, you can see its entire history pop up right on the screen.
That's cool.
Or you're walking through your living room and you're trying to decide if you have space for a new armchair, and then bam, a virtual armchair appears right before your eyes.
No more like trying to awkwardly like imagine it or hold up pieces of paper, to see if it'll fit. I love it.
Yeah, it's super useful.
Okay, and then there's MR.
MR.
Which this is where things get really, really wild.
This is where the magic happens.
Yeah, MR is like right there in the
Wow.
intersection of virtual and real, and it's like it blends them together even more seamlessly than AR does.
Yeah.
Like imagine you're on a construction site and you can interact with like holographic blueprints.
Whoa.
Or you can collaborate with colleagues around a virtual table, but you're actually miles apart. It's like the future of teamwork,
It's like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Okay, so I was doing some prep for this deep dive, and you know what really blew me away? Unity is the powerhouse behind so many of these experiences that we're talking about. I mean, you look at those must-play Apple Vision Pro games, over half of them, made with Unity. 2/3 of those killer experiences on the Meta Quest. Unity again. Those are some serious stats. It really is amazing. I think it's Unity's accessibility that makes it such a dominant force in the XR world. They've put together this incredible ecosystem with resources like Unity Learn Pathways, which is amazing because it's totally free, and it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're a seasoned pro, there's something there for everyone. It's like they've made it so easy to just jump in and start building.
See, that's what I love about Unity. It's like super powerful, but it's also approachable. It's not one of those things where you have to, spend years and years and go to some special school to even understand it,
Exactly.
But before we get into the weeds, with the toolkits and the actual development side of things, I want to talk about something that I think really at the heart of any immersive experience, world building. Because it's so much more than just the graphics, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, we're not just talking about pretty pictures here. We're talking about crafting entire realities from the ground up. Realities that tell a story, that pull the user in and make them feel like they're a part of something bigger. And every single element plays a role in that, whether it's the way light flickers in a dusty old mansion or the weight of an ancient artifact when you pick it up. Every little detail matters.
It's like the difference between watching a movie and actually living it,
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what makes games like Demio and Job Simulator so masterful when it comes to XR world building. I mean, yeah, they look incredible, they're visually stunning, but they also use things like spatial audio to make you feel truly present in that environment.
Oh.
So it's not just what you see, it's what you hear too. The sound of your footsteps echoing in a dungeon or in Job Simulator, the sound of dishes clattering when you try to make a burger, those little details are what really create that powerful sense of immersion.
Okay, so we've established that building these worlds, it's about creating this multi-sensory experience. But let's get real for a sec. I know some people listening might be thinking, hold on, diving headfirst into a game engine sounds kind of intimidating.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That learning curve, it can feel pretty daunting when you're first starting out, but that's the beauty of Unity. They've clearly thought about that, and they've built tools to make the whole process surprisingly approachable. We'll take the AR Foundation, for example. That toolkit is I don't know, it's like having a magic wand that's specifically designed to help you bridge that gap between the real and digital worlds.
So the AR Foundation is like the secret sauce behind all those amazing AR experiences we were just talking about. Can you give us an example? How could someone use this to actually bring their AR vision to life?
Okay, so let's say you're creating an app that lets users design their dream garden, right? So they can place virtual plants and landscaping features in their actual backyard using their phone or tablet. The AR Foundation gives you the framework to do that. Like it handles things like plane detection, so your app knows where those virtual flowers should be touching down on the ground. And then it also helps with the light estimation, so those virtual plants cast realistic shadows and they blend in seamlessly with the real world.
So it's like the AR Foundation does all the heavy lifting behind the scenes, so you're free to focus on the creative side of things.
Exactly. And then when you're ready to create those really intuitive interactions that make an XR experience so captivating, Unity has you covered there too, with something called the XR Interaction Toolkit, or XRI for short.
Okay, before we get totally lost in the alphabet soup of Unity tools, let's unpack XRI a bit. What makes this toolkit so essential for XR developers?
Okay, so imagine you're reaching out to grab a virtual object, right? In the real world, that's an action that feels totally effortless. But when you try to translate that natural movement into the digital world, it can actually get surprisingly complex. And that's where XRI comes in. It takes care of all those tricky little intricacies for you.
So it's like having a whole team of expert developers just handing you these pre-built solutions for all those tricky XR interactions.
Precisely. It doesn't matter if it's something like picking up objects or teleporting around a virtual environment or even interacting with, like UI elements, but you're doing it with hand gestures. XRI just makes it all feel so intuitive and responsive. And that way, you can pour your energy into designing fun gameplay mechanics and crafting a really compelling narrative without getting bogged down in all the really technical stuff like hand tracking and physics.
This is what gets me so excited about all of this, honestly. Having these incredibly powerful tools at your fingertips to build these experiences that just they feel so immersive and so intuitive. It's incredible.
It really is. And it's only getting more and more exciting, as technology keeps evolving. Speaking of which, have you heard about Unity's role in the Apple Vision Pro and this whole new world of spatial computing?
Oh yeah, that feels like a whole other rabbit hole that we could dive into.
Oh, for sure.
But before we do, I want to make sure our listener really understands how Unity approaches building games from the ground up. So let's imagine for a moment that our listener is a budding game developer who has this killer idea for a horror game. Okay, so our listener has this awesome horror game idea, right? It's brewing, they're excited. Maybe it takes place in like a crumbling crypt, like super dark, super creepy, and the player has to solve all these puzzles to escape before, something sinister gets them.
Ooh, I like it. Classic.
Right. So like, what are those few steps our listener would take to bring that vision to life inside of Unity?
Well, I think it all starts with nailing down the core experience. Like, what is it about this particular crypt that's going to make it stand out? What makes it unique? Is it going to be the backstory, revealed through environmental storytelling, maybe with like creepy whispers and stuff?
Yeah.
Or is it more about the sound design? Like those unsettling noises that just keep the players on edge the whole time? Because remember, with horror, sometimes what you don't see is just as terrifying as what you do see.
Ooh, it's a good point. It's like you're setting the stage for a horror movie, but it's interactive. So you've got to think about the pacing, the atmosphere. Like you want those jump scares, right?
Sure.
But you don't want to overdo it.
Exactly. You want that perfect balance of tension and release. But anyway, once you've got that blueprint, that's when the real fun begins. You get to start building those terrifying environments and puzzles directly within Unity. And that's where a tool like PreBuilder comes in. It's a game changer, especially when you're designing for VR.
We touched on ProBuilder a little bit earlier, but let's go deeper. What is it about this tool that makes it so perfect for VR development?
Okay, so picture this. You're wearing a VR headset, right? But instead of just playing the game, you are inside the Unity editor. Like you are actually in the game world, sculpting the walls of the crypt with your own two hands. It's wild.
Oh, hold on. So I'm basically a virtual architect now.
Yeah.
But instead of blueprints, I'm building haunted crypts.
Pretty much. And the best part is you can instantly get a feel for the scale, the spatial relationships between everything. Like,
Yeah.
how claustrophobic does this corridor feel? You can experience all of that firsthand in VR as you're designing it.
Oh, it's going to save so much time being able to iterate on the level design in VR like that, instead of like going back and forth between the editor and the headset.
It completely changes the game when it comes to rapid prototyping. But listen, there's a catch. Because, creating these immersive worlds, especially for VR, it means you got to be really mindful of performance. Like, we want spooky, not slow and laggy.
Right, because there's nothing that like breaks that sense of immersion more than like frame rate drops or the game stuttering, because it's trying to load. So how do we make sure our horror game looks amazing without sacrificing all that performance?
Optimization. Optimization is key. Our source doc actually had a really clever example of this. Remember that super detailed crypt we were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, the developers used a technique called trim sheets to texture that entire environment. And it's super efficient.
Okay, I'm going to need you to break that down for me. What are trim sheets and how do they actually like help keep things running smoothly?
So think of a trim sheet like a texture atlas. It's
Hmm.
basically one big image that contains a bunch of smaller textures, all organized really carefully. So instead of having like a unique texture for every single little nook and cranny of the crypt, which would be a nightmare for performance, you strategically arrange those textures on this trim sheet, and then you just apply them to the environment.
So it's like you're creating this visual illusion of complexity, but without actually like overloading the system with all those individual textures.
Exactly. It's all about working smarter, not harder. And it's amazing what you can achieve with these techniques. Okay, so now that we've built our spooky crypt, got our puzzles in place, and we've optimized everything to run smoothly, it's time to put on our, debugging hats and make sure this thing actually works.
Yeah, because it's one thing to like design it all on paper or in VR, I guess,
Yeah.
but then it's like, okay, moment of truth. Does it actually work? Does it crash and burn? Or does it scare the pants off of us?
The million-dollar question, and this is where another amazing Unity tool comes in, the profiler. Think of it like a detective, but for your game's
Okay,
performance.
I like it.
It digs deep, analyzes everything, it looks at frame rates, it identifies any bottlenecks, it can even pinpoint things like, I don't know, that one flickering torch that's somehow tanking the entire game's performance. It's super specific.
So it's like having X-ray vision into your game's inner workings. You can see what's going on under the hood.
Exactly. Although, even with the profiler, it can get a little tedious constantly having to put on the VR headset to test out every little tweak and change you make.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, don't get me wrong, I love VR, but I don't know if I want to be stuck in a headset all day long.
Right. So luckily, Unity has a solution for that too. The XR device simulator is like a lifesaver for VR development because it lets you mimic all those headset and controller inputs, but you're doing it all from within the Unity editor.
Okay, so let me get this straight. I can test how a player moves through the environment, but I'm just using my mouse and keyboard, no headset required.
Yep. And it's not just movement. You need to check hand interactions. The simulator's got you covered, UI stuff. It can handle it.
So you can fine-tune all those little interactions without having to strap on the headset every 5 seconds. That is incredibly efficient. Speaking of game changers in the XR world, though, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, or should I say the Vision Pro.
Right. The Apple Vision Pro. That, along with the whole concept of spatial computing, I mean, it really does represent a huge shift in how we interact with technology,
Yeah.
because it's all about blending that digital information with the physical world around us and doing it in a way that feels seamless and intuitive.
It's like the future is finally catching up to like all those sci-fi dreams we had as kids.
Hmm.
But before we go too far down that road, can you explain exactly what spatial computing is for those who might be hearing this term for the very first time?
Of course, yeah. So imagine a world where your physical space, like your actual living room or office, it becomes an extension of your digital workspace. So instead of just having one little screen, you could have virtual monitors all around you, or you could have interactive 3D models popping up on your coffee table. You could even have shared collaborative spaces that exist both physically and virtually at the same time. That's the promise of spatial computing. And the Vision Pro, powered by Unity, it's a huge step towards making all of that a reality.
Okay, so this is where it gets really, really exciting. We're talking about taking XR beyond those self-contained VR experiences and actually weaving it into the fabric of our everyday lives. It's huge. So how does Unity empower developers to actually create for this new world, this world of spatial computing?
That's a great question. So think of Unity as the creative engine that's driving these four main types of Vision Pro experiences. First, you've got your fully immersive VR experiences, right? Those are the ones that transport users to those incredible virtual worlds. But then you've got mixed reality, which can either be windowed, meaning it kind of coexists with other apps on the Vision Pro.
Okay, so it's like having multiple windows open on your computer, but it's in a mixed reality environment. Got it.
Exactly. Or you can have fully immersive mixed reality where it takes over the entire display, and that's when it blends in seamlessly with your actual surroundings. It's pretty wild.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like you get to choose different levels of integration between the real and the virtual, depending on the experience you're trying to create. But let's talk about performance for a moment.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about building for something as powerful as the Vision Pro, a device that's literally designed to like blend digital and physical so seamlessly. That's got to come with its own set of, technical challenges, right? I mean, it's one thing to create like a really beautiful, compelling virtual world, but when you're also trying to blend that seamlessly with the real world, you know, track hand movements, make sure everything's
Yeah.
just really smooth and responsive, that's got to be tricky.
Oh, it definitely adds a whole new layer of complexity, but that's where Unity's approach really shines. I mean, they're not just focused on the here and now, they're already thinking about the future. And they've integrated technologies like foveated rendering into their universal render pipeline URP, for short, to tackle these performance hurdles head on.
Okay, need a little help with that one. Foveated rendering, is that like some kind of fancy chef term, but for game development?
Not quite as delicious, but I see where you're going with that. So foveated rendering, it's basically all about working smarter, not harder, right? Think about how your eyes actually work for a second. You only really see super sharp detail in a tiny area right at the center of your vision. Foveated rendering basically takes advantage of that. So it renders those areas where you're focusing your eyes in super high detail, but then it cleverly optimizes everything in your peripheral vision to kind of like reduce the processing load on the system.
So it's like it's creating this illusion, but an illusion that actually works because our brains kind of fill in the gaps anyway.
That's exactly it. It's like a visual magic trick that maintains these really high levels of fidelity without absolutely destroying your system trying to render everything perfectly all at once.
That's brilliant. It's like Unity's anticipating challenges that most of us haven't even thought about yet. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second, okay? For our listener who's just starting to dip their toes into this vast kind of intimidating world of XR development, what would you say is like the most important thing for them to remember as they're starting out?
Honestly, don't overthink it. Unity has made this process incredibly approachable. That's really the beauty of it, I think. They've got these incredible resources like Unity Learn, the AR Foundation, the XR Interaction Toolkit. I mean, they've really democratized XR development. You don't need a massive budget or like a fancy degree in computer science to start bringing your ideas to life.
It's like they're saying, look, if you want to create awesome XR experiences, we've got the tools, go make it happen. I love that. And, it's kind of mind-blowing to think that the next job simulator, the next Demio, it could come from someone who's listening to this right now feeling inspired.
Exactly. The technology is absolutely incredible these days, but what really makes an experience stand out, what makes it truly special, is that spark of creativity, that unique perspective that you bring to the table. Nobody else can replicate that.
So to our listener who's hopefully feeling inspired to dive in and start exploring all these amazing possibilities, I'll just say this. Don't be afraid to experiment, okay? Go explore Unity, take advantage of all those incredible resources they have, most of which are totally free, and just let your imagination run wild, because the future of XR, it's waiting to be shaped, and you might just be the person to shape it.